If you met someone in 2002 and they told you that they are a Pokemon fan, it pretty much meant one of three things. Either they loved the Pokemon RPG video games, which at that point were selling like crazy. They followed Ash's adventures in Johto on TV. The Master Quest season was just starting to air in English at this point. Or they were into the Pokemon trading card game and were battling friends during recess. There was also merchandise at this point, but if you weren't at least a fan of the three things that I mentioned before, you weren't really interested in buying Pokemon merchandise, to be honest. If we're talking spin-offs, Pokemon Pinball had just come out in like 1999. So realistically, the main Pokemon games were the heart of the fandom at this point. Fast forward to 2025, and the words "I'm a Pokemon fan" could mean basically anything. You're maybe into the mainline series of games, the latest being Scarlet and Violet in 2022, or you're hyped for Pokemon Legends EA. Maybe you watch the anime, though Ash isn't really the main character anymore, or one of the spin-off animated series, or even the animated shorts and movies. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. You could be catching Pokemon in your sleep with Pokemon Sleep. You could be playing Pokemon Go, which is still massive, and transferring Pokemon to Pokemon Home, which is an app that still exists. You could be playing Pokemon Unite, or you could be playing in Pokken Tournament, or relaxing with Cafe Remix. Maybe you're missing Pokemon Ranger, which hasn't had a new installment in many, many years. Or you're just into collecting the plushies, which is pretty valid because there was that Pokemon Snorlax that came out that was like $400. Pokemon exists in basically every medium you can imagine right now. And for the most part, I think that's a great thing. The Pokemon Company has turned what could have been another late 90s fad into one of the most enduring franchises on Earth. There's a problem with that I've been thinking about for a while, and after watching the most recent Pokemon Presents where they revealed Mega Dragonite, it kind of came back to the forefront of my mind, and I wanted to talk about it a little bit. So to recap kind of how we got here, the Pokemon Company, which was founded in 1998, is a joint venture between Game Freak, who make the games, and Nintendo, who publish the games. The idea was pretty simple. Let's let Game Freak focus on developing the games, while the Pokemon Company handles the brand, the merchandising, the licensing, the global business, all of the annoying stuff that Game Freak realistically shouldn't really have to think about. That division works pretty well until it doesn't. Because Pokemon is now a global mega brand at this point, right? It's not just a game series, it's infrastructure, it's the machine behind what makes Pokemon what it is. But the thing is that everything still depends on the games. So, every new generation launches new merch, new cards, a new anime series, everything. So if the game is delayed, the whole machine slows down, and that means they can't delay. I feel like that pressure is why the main games have felt a bit off recently. People have been talking about this for a while. They talked about Sword and Shield's visuals, the trees being really muddy looking, or maybe that was in Scarlet and Violet. I can't quite recall. There were visual complaints about both of those games. In Scarlet and Violet's case, a big thing was the glitches, the towns that feel half finished. Even the National Dex controversy that happened with Sword and Shield, I think it was, is another after effect of this thing that I've been noticing for a while. After a certain point, you can't realistically cram 1,000+ Pokemon into every new region without breaking things. The formula for Pokemon hasn't really changed much after all this time. You're still primarily catching Pokemon and building teams and earning badges and beating the champion. And that still works. That core loop is what makes Pokemon still fun after all these years. And there have been slight deviations here and there, but that is what people come to Pokemon for. So I feel like part of the issue here is that there's a need to stick to that formula in a way that makes it engaging by introducing new characters and new Pokemon. And that constraint also makes it a bit hard to truly innovate. When you get to this point where game development feels like manufacturing an experience rather than art, players notice. You look at Pal World, as chaotic as it is, it had a soul to it. Like, it had energy and people noticed it. So where are we headed from here? I don't think Pokemon is going anywhere. It's still the highest grossing media franchise in the world, but right now it's kind of a victim of its own success a little bit. the machine can't stop, even if the games are showing cracks. I'm still hopeful personally. I know that the Legends Arceus games really showed that Game Freak can experiment, and from what I'm seeing in Pokemon Legends ZA, it looks like they're interested in continuing to try new things. When I think about potential solutions to this problem, obviously the ideal fix, I think, is just to slow things down a little bit, allow longer development cycles, or like actually allow the developers to delay the game if they need to. But realistically, with the business machine running behind the scenes, that's kind of unlikely. Another plausible idea is, and this is something I actually heard from someone in a comment recently, is to actually split the main series of Pokemon games into two. One branch for the more competitive focus side of the series, and then one for more casual, classic Pokemon experience games. And the benefit of doing that is that the more casual focused games could be easier to develop, because I feel like the bar is a bit lower if you're just really trying to nail the Pokemon single player, maybe play with friends experience. And then you can free time for the competitive side of the game to maybe even be handled by the dedicated team or a separate developer entirely, with Game Freak advising, of course. Pokemon's future isn't set in stone, but I do think it's at a bit of a crossroads. I'm curious to hear what you all think though. This is something I've been thinking about for a while, and I'm really curious if other folks have noticed these issues as well, and if there are other solutions that people have thought of that are different from what I have. But yeah, let me know and drop your thoughts in the comments. Thanks.